Hello everyone, this is update for October 27, 2022, day 246 of the war and of the date update. So there's not many changes on the front line, even there are fighting. I'll discuss more of the strategic situation again, what's going on in the world, where we're all heading. First, today, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, came out and made a statement that China will support Russia and will intensify its cooperation with Russia. So this is another step or another signpost showing that this is, that we are seeing forming, you know, military political alliance between the two countries, and the sort of ties and connections getting stronger and stronger. But I think at this point it's not surprise, it's just kind of becoming more sort of official and visible to everyone. At the same time, Russian president today gave a speech and also Q&A in Valdai Forum, and the actually I think it's largely misunderstood in the West what he was trying to say, and what he was trying to say is he was what actually not even to say what he tried to do is to establish moral superiority, because he understands that those who have moral superiority win the war. And so what he tried to show is, decay and decadence, a degeneration of the West, and sort of kind of describe, that Russia is sort of not jumping into this abyss. The problem is, while some of those criticisms was fair, at the same time Russia does not have anything to offer to anyone, and actually has to offer even worse sort of opportunity relative to the West. So in other words, this was kind of like, you know, um, nice attempt, but it doesn't work because there is nothing positive that Russia can offer that would be interesting for the rest of the world. Nevertheless, he's still trying, and it was a pretty well written, pretty sort of well directed speech that he gave there. And then there's a statistical information came out of Russia that shows significant damage to the economy, and more like um, industrial economy, producers, not so much to services. So for just like some of the numbers, the production of fertilizers I think fell like by 14%. Steel production fell by 10%. This is year on year numbers. Auto production, I think, went down 77%. So essentially, and this is, I believe, cumulative since the beginning of the year. So if you really look at the, let's say September, just the months, probably would seem much worse numbers, because cumulative numbers, they kind of hide recent dynamic that's obviously is present in Russia and Ukraine. And as I said, Ukraine is wiped out completely at this point. There's not even, that's why I'm not even trying to discuss anything, because there's really no economy in Ukraine, and Ukraine is totally dependent, I would say 100% on the financial and military support of the West. At the same time, I want to reiterate this, that this is actually failure of Ukrainian leadership, or I would say there's really no leadership, even though it looks like there is one in Ukraine, because a lot of this could have been sort of addressed, and the damage would not have been so um, pervasive, widespread in Ukraine, and Ukraine could still have something that it would have been sort of less dependent and produce something, create some value add, in including military wise. I think I mentioned before, essentially any production of military equipment is prohibited by the government, and sort of it's transferred to a bunch of government-run enterprises which are totally corrupt, inept, never was able to produce anything in sort of useful on the battlefield in large quantities. The only probably exception would be Ukrainian anti-tank complex missile Stugna, which is actually in many ways, I would say, better than Javelin, but probably not also fair comparison um, because they're a little bit different systems in general. But Ukraine cannot even produce Stugna anymore, so that's just kind of you know uh, the assessment of the Ukrainian government and its capabilities. Then the next important topic is energy supply in Ukraine, or specific electricity distribution network. So there was another attack by Russian forces, and they hit some transformer station, substation, as they called, here near Bila Tserkva, somewhere around here, and apparently somewhere up north in North Kiev. So at this point, the system is on the verge of collapse. And Ukraine government openly said that everybody prepare for the situation where we'll have no electricity. So the basically what I've been saying before is that there's not much left for Russia to attack before the system will first disintegrate into sort of like islands with a lot of darkness between the islands, and then Russia will try to sort of finish off those islands one by one. And the key point, what they try to achieve, is they try to isolate nuclear power stations, because they sort of don't dare to attack obviously nuclear power station, because that's going to be a huge problem. So what they do, they and this is where the majority of electricity at this point is generated in Ukraine. In addition to hydropower station, so Ukraine has quite a bit of, as you can see here, a lot of this artificial lakes which generate a lot of hydropower in Ukraine. So so that's another large source of electricity. So Ukraine has quite a bit of power generation capacity, and it's not even being utilized anywhere close to full potential, because simply there is no need. And demand for electricity also at the same time fell down significantly. So it's also very small, because most of the industry is dead and sort of idle, and consumers, may be surprised to most people, but consumers don't really consume much. That's relatively small load on entire network. So it's mostly consumed by industrial, businesses, large businesses, and more so like like steel making and things like that. Um, so, anyways, the system is essentially one or two or three steps from the collapse. And going back, Russia tries to isolate those nuclear power stations, because the main producers at this point. And once you isolate nuclear power stations, then then Ukraine probably will not have enough generation capacity. So that's just essentially what's going on, and this sort of whole war at the sort of last stages of it. So it probably won't take, depending obviously like on intensity of attacks, Russian attacks, and but it doesn't look like it will take much more to sort of put the sort of final blow or finish it off. Now let's actually switch to the front line. Let's see what's going on there. We'll start in in a clockwise fashion, starting from the very north. So the situation along the state border is relatively quiet. There's still exchange of all sort of adversarial actions, but it's relatively quiet. Now let's jump to North Luhansk front line. Things here are I would say, unsuccessfully for Ukrainian side. There are attempts to attack out of Nevsky, out of from the Storsky region essentially. There are also reports that there are attacks in this area, but they all were unsuccessful. This goes back to the point that I'll be making, that this is totally lost, missed opportunities and lost victories by Ukrainian side. At this point, Russian side has enough of mobilized soldiers, enough boots on the ground to be able to withstand Ukrainian attacks. So, as I said, I think yesterday, at this point, Ukraine does not have advantage that it can use to achieve sort of breakthrough on this front line. And by that I mean, like, let's say even like Ukraine has advantage, for example, in in all of the self-propelled howitzers or HIMARS rockets, but it's still, there is significant gap in the skills and in ability to utilize those tools in efficient way. So that sort of greatly devalues the value of those tools. So even basically, it's like almost kind of say, okay, you know, you can give whatever advanced tool to someone who doesn't really know how to really use it well. So there won't be much use. There will be some, but it's not going to get utilized. You will not, let's say, unleash the full power of the tool. And so this is kind of where it stands at this point. Where it's going to go remains to be seen, really unclear at this point. Then now let's jump to North Donbass front lines. Six here are, as always, sort of the same. Wagner mercenaries continues their attacks, sort of north of Bakhmut, south of it, straight frontal, without much progress, but nevertheless they continue their attacks, and it happens that over some time they actually manage to make some gains, but nothing today. Now let's move to central Donbass front line. Since here also very standard, straight, like nothing changes. Attacks in Marinka, and then attacks from this Pesky bridgehead that, essentially this essentially doesn't lead anywhere. Now let's quickly check Zaporizhya front line. Things here are the same, stable, quiet, nothing really major happening here. Now let's finish with Kherson bridgehead. Things here also were quiet, no major attacks. Things are pretty steady here. Both sides sort of on defensive, and at the same time, even though yes, there are more Russian troops here, there are more boots on the ground. This is still area that where Ukraine can still achieve success, even though Russian side has more troops on the ground, simply by cutting off those supply lines. And that actually in some way, if this if Ukrainian side would be more capable, this is actually even sort of better, because you have more troops in a trap essentially. But unfortunately, some of those attacks, they're not consistent. It's not sort of consistently day after day methodically applied by Ukrainian side. So basically, they release the open the valve, and then Russian side gets what it needs. Still not enough, but situation is not far from perfect there. But it's not sort of kind of like desperate, where they really need to think what to do about it. And then there is another little update. Ukraine, there's another brigade being formed, 77 Airborne Brigade on Ukrainian side. I'll update once it shows up on the front line. Okay, thanks everyone for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.